December 1943. The bitter winds of the North Atlantic clawed at the grey skies as another Allied convoy, lumbering its way across the treacherous expanse, faced a familiar, terrifying ordeal. Submerged German U-boats, like silent predators, struck with deadly precision, sinking merchant vessels and escort ships despite the constant vigilance of Allied naval forces. The airwaves, a cacophony of crackling static and coded bursts, offered maddeningly little in the way of reliable intelligence, as German naval communications remained frustratingly elusive, their origins dissolving into the ether before conventional direction finding could pinpoint them. It seemed the Kriegsmarine held an invisible advantage, one that cost thousands of lives and countless tons of vital supplies. Yet the key to unlocking this invisible war would not come from a grand strategic directive or a cutting-edge research lab, but from a forgotten corner, born of frustration and unorthodox thinking. Before we dive into this story, drop a quick hi in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. It really helps support the channel. Today we unravel the extraordinary tale of a US radio technician whose quiet persistence and a radical antenna modification didn't just expose a hidden German network, but fundamentally shifted the tide of the war. Radio technician third-class Samuel Miller adjusted the worn headset. The familiar hiss of the shortwave band, a constant companion in the cramped radio room aboard the USS Bainbridge, a destroyer escort plying the frigid waters of convoy ONS-24. His eyes, perpetually tired but sharp, scanned the spectrum analyzer, a jumble of dancing green lines that rarely yielded solid data on German U-boat chatter. Sam, a lanky 23-year-old from Toledo, Ohio, possessed an innate understanding of electronics that bordered on intuition, a gift he'd honed tinkering with ham radio sets in his father's garage long before the war. But even his intuition was frustrated by the Germans' cunning. Their signals, brief and highly compressed, often vanished before the Bainbridge's standard direction-finding equipment could get a fix. The U-boats were communicating, they had to be, coordinating their Wolfpack attacks, reporting on convoy movements, but where were they calling from? And how were they doing it so effectively under the constant threat of Allied countermeasures? Commander Richard Thorne, the Bainbridge's grizzled executive officer and an intelligence liaison, often paced the radio room, his brow furrowed with concern. Thorne, a stickler for procedure and conventional methods, respected Sam's technical prowess but dismissed his occasional outlandish suggestions for equipment modifications. "Stick to the manual, Miller," Thorne would often say. These systems were designed by the best minds in the Navy. But Sam knew that the best minds hadn't anticipated the full extent of German ingenuity in communications. He watched the green lines jump, a fleeting burst of encrypted data that told them a U-boat was active, somewhere out there, but gave no clue to its position. The ship's sonar pinged a rhythmic, lonely sound, and the distant thud of depth charges from another escort reverberated through the hull, a grim reminder of the stakes. The desperation was palpable. The sheer volume of Allied shipping losses in the Atlantic was unsustainable, threatening to choke off Britain and cripple any future invasion efforts. Current radio intelligence relied heavily on shore-based high-frequency direction finding, or HFDF stations nicknamed Huff Duff, which could pick up long-range signals. But for the close quarters, burst transmissions, Huff Duff was often too slow, too broad. The enemy was adapting faster than the Allies could respond. Sam felt a cold dread mix with a burning curiosity. There had to be a way to pierce through the static, to make the invisible visible. He kept copious notes, scribbling down signal characteristics, frequencies, and even the fleeting atmospheric conditions that seemed to accompany some of the more elusive transmissions. His bunkmate, Petty Officer First Class Elena Rodriguez, a sharp, no-nonsense radio operator with an encyclopedic memory for Morse code and signal patterns, often found him hunched over schematic diagrams, muttering to himself. Eleanor, who had served on destroyers in the Pacific before being transferred to the Atlantic, understood the frustration. "Another ghost, Sam?" she'd ask, her voice tinged with weariness. "Another ghost, Elena," he'd confirm, running a hand through his perpetually messy hair. The ghosts were costing lives. Every lost ship, every lost sailor fueled Sam's quiet resolve. He knew the official channels were working on solutions, allocating vast resources to cryptanalysis and conventional signals intelligence. But what if the solution wasn't about more of the same, but something entirely different? What if the answer lay in thinking outside the very box of standardized equipment and accepted wisdom? The thought nagged at him, a tiny, persistent hum in the back of his mind, much like the faint, almost imperceptible signals he sometimes caught, just at the edge of audibility before they vanished. The standard equipment, designed for broad-spectrum reception and general communication, simply wasn't cutting it against the highly specialized German techniques. The limitations were physical, rooted in the very design of the antennae themselves, built for reliability and versatility, not for detecting a whisper in a hurricane. Sam envisioned something more focused, more sensitive, something that could snatch those fleeting whispers from the air, hold onto them and give them substance. The challenge was immense, the resources limited, and the existing hierarchy firmly entrenched in established protocols. Yet the stakes were too high for inaction. The North Atlantic remained a graveyard, and the Allies were still largely fighting blind. The Bainbridge returned to port, its crew weary but relieved after a grueling 3-week patrol. While the ship underwent refitting and resupply, Sam found himself drawn to the ship's boneyard, a clutter of discarded equipment deemed obsolete or irreparable. Amidst the rusted bulkheads and defunct machinery, he spotted it, a damaged multi-element Yagi-Uda antenna, originally designed for experimental VHF communications. It was bent, one of its directors snapped, but its fundamental structure intrigued him. Standard direction-finding antennae were often large loop antennae or arrays, effective for triangulation, but less sensitive to very weak signals, especially those of short duration. Sam's mind began to churn. He pulled the Yagi from the pile, ignoring the grime and rust. Back in the cramped workshop adjacent to the radio room, a space he'd unofficially claimed, he began to dissect it. His idea was simple in concept, radical in application. Instead of a broad sweep, he wanted to create an antenna that was hyper-focused, almost like a sniper rifle for radio waves. He theorized that the German U-boat bursts, while brief, possessed unique phase characteristics and harmonic components that conventional antennae either ignored or filtered out as noise. What if he could design an array that wasn't just directional, but actively nulled out ambient noise from specific directions, while amplifying a narrow, fleeting signal? He spent hours, late into the night, poring over textbooks on antenna theory, sketching modifications on grease-stained napkins. He salvaged copper wire from an old generator, painstakingly straightened the bent elements of the Yagi, and began to add his own smaller parasitic elements, meticulously spacing them, experimenting with different lengths and angles. He wasn't just fixing the antenna, he was completely redesigning its fundamental interaction with the electromagnetic spectrum. He even jury-rigged a primitive phasing circuit using scavenged capacitors and inductors, allowing him to subtly shift the antenna's receive pattern, effectively creating a very narrow, electronically steerable beam that could be swept across the horizon with far greater precision than existing mechanical rotators. His focus was on boosting the signal-to-noise ratio for specific, high-frequency, transient signals. It was a painstaking process, often yielding frustrating results. Sparks would fly, circuits would fail, and the delicate copper wires would snap under his fatigued hands. Elena would sometimes drop by, bringing him lukewarm coffee, her presence a quiet form of encouragement. "Still chasing ghosts, Sam?" she'd ask, watching him with an amused but respectful gaze. "Trying to build a better net, Elena," he'd reply, wiping grease from his forehead. Commander Thorne, however, was less understanding. He spotted Sam's project during one of his routine inspections. "Miller, what in the blazes is this contraption?" he demanded, pointing to the reconfigured Yagi now festooned with extra wires and small makeshift components. "It's an experimental antenna." "Commander," Sam explained, "designed to improve our chances of intercepting those elusive German bursts. I believe I can achieve significantly higher gain and directionality for very short-duration signals." Thorne scoffed. "Miller, our equipment is standard issue for a reason. Reliability, proven performance. You're wasting valuable resources on a personal hobby project." We have regulations for a reason. But, Commander, the regulations aren't getting us answers. The U-boats are still sinking our convoys. We need a new approach. Sam's voice, usually mild, held a rare edge of conviction. Thorne glared. Innovation is one thing, Miller. Reckless disregard for procedure is another. Get this contraption back where you found it. Or properly catalogued and cleared through official channels. I expect you to be focusing on your assigned duties, not moonlighting as an inventor. The rebuke stung, but Sam was undeterred. He simply worked more discreetly, often late at night when Thorne was off duty, fueled by the sheer necessity of the problem and the knowledge that every failure to detect a U-boat signal had dire consequences. Elena, seeing his determination, quietly offered her assistance. She had a keen ear for the subtle nuances of radio interference and could help him calibrate his jury-rigged phasing circuits. Together, they continued their clandestine experiments, driven by the urgency of war and a shared belief that the answer, however unconventional, was out there. One frigid night, huddled in the Bainbridge's communications room, Sam and Elena made a breakthrough. The ship was on a routine patrol, and the airwaves were relatively quiet, save for the usual static and distant Allied traffic. Sam had painstakingly connected his modified Yagi antenna, now encased in a rough canvas cover, to a spare receiver, carefully bypassing the ship's main antenna array. He adjusted the course tuning, then fine-tuned his custom phasing circuit, sweeping his ultra-directional beam across the horizon. Elena, wearing her headphones, monitored the main communications. Suddenly, Sam's head snapped up. "Did you hear that, Elena?" he whispered, his voice taut with excitement. She shook her head. "Nothing on the main set, Sam, just background chatter." He gestured for her to put on his spare headset. He replayed a short burst from his modified receiver's recorder. It was faint, barely audible above the static, but unmistakably a German CW burst, a rapid, almost impossibly brief sequence of Morse code. It was just a fraction of a second, but it was there, he insisted. Eleanor listened intently. "Good heavens, Sam, you're right. It's a Type B burst, but it's almost too clean, and so faint." The signal, while weak, possessed a distinct spectral signature, a specific frequency, a precise duration, and a unique modulation characteristic that Sam had been observing. It was unlike the more common, higher-powered transmissions. They recorded the signal, played it back repeatedly, and processed it through the rudimentary audio filters Sam had also jury-rigged. The signature remained. It was a ghost, yes, but a palpable one now. They spent the next 72 hours in a frenzy, rotating the antenna, meticulously logging every faint burst, cross-referencing their data with the ship's navigation logs and the sparse reports of other convoys. Sam's antenna, with its unique nulling capability and hyperfocus, was picking up signals that the conventional equipment simply couldn't touch. The signals were always short, lasting less than a second and often at frequencies considered dead zones by the standard naval equipment. The geographic data they were collecting, however, was puzzling. The triangulated positions, while imprecise given the short duration and single ship's perspective, consistently pointed not to known U-boat operational areas in the open ocean, but to a stretch of the Scandinavian coast, specifically the remote, rugged coastline of occupied Norway. This was highly unusual. U-boats typically communicated from their patrol sectors or from designated rendezvous points in the Atlantic. Why would they be transmitting from a fixed land-based position in Norway and with such faint, specialized signals? Thorne, initially dismissive, grew increasingly intrigued by Sam's detailed logs and the repeated detections. "Miller, you're telling me you're picking up German U-boat traffic from land?" he asked, rubbing his chin. "Not from a U-boat, Commander, but the signal characteristics match U-boat operational bursts. My theory is these are land-based relay stations using highly directional antennae, possibly to communicate with U-boats or other clandestine operations in the North Sea or even the Arctic." Thorne, ever the pragmatist, was skeptical. "We have extensive aerial reconnaissance over that region. There are no known major German installations matching your coordinates. Our agents report nothing significant." He authorized a preliminary report to be sent up the chain of command. attaching Sam's data with a clear disclaimer about its unconventional origin. Days later, a terse reply came back from Fleet Intelligence Command. Unconfirmed. Suggest further observation. Reconnaissance flight requested over designated coordinates yielded no visible installations. Assume atmospheric interference or equipment anomaly. The words hit Sam hard. His heart sank. He had proven his concept, and yet the bureaucracy, the established assumptions, still triumphed over tangible evidence. Thorne, though disappointed, remained pragmatic. "See, Miller, they're not going to believe us without irrefutable proof. You need to narrow that down. We need precision, not just a whisper and a general coastline." Sam clenched his jaw. He had seen the proof in the static, felt it in the vibrations of the receiver. He knew he wasn't wrong. The challenge was now clearer. Turn the whisper into a shout and locate the invisible installations with undeniable accuracy. He retreated back to his workshop, the dismissal from command only strengthening his resolve. He would find a way. The dismissal from Fleet Intelligence stung, but it didn't break Sam. It merely redirected his focus, fueling a quiet determination. He knew the problem wasn't his antenna. It was the method of verification. Visual reconnaissance, however thorough, couldn't detect what was expertly hidden. He needed more data, more precision. Over the next few weeks, Sam devoted himself to refining his system. He realized that a single modified antenna, even a highly directional one, was limited in its triangulation accuracy. What he needed was a network. Working tirelessly, and now with Elena's full overt support, they began to scavenge for additional components. They discovered another damaged Yagi-Uda antenna on a sister ship in port, and managed to acquire a few more discarded radio parts through official requisitions that cleverly obscured their true purpose. Sam adapted 2 more antennae, replicating his initial modifications with painstaking detail. His idea was simple. If one antenna could detect the ghost, 3, strategically spaced, could pinpoint its location with unprecedented accuracy. The challenge was getting the other ships to cooperate. Commander Thorne, however, had undergone a subtle but significant transformation. The lack of concrete results from the official reconnaissance flight, coupled with Sam's unwavering conviction and Elena's quiet endorsements, had chipped away at his skepticism. He recognized Sam's talent, even if it defied convention. "Miller," Thorne stated one morning, "I'll try to arrange for 2 other destroyer escorts in this convoy group to assist in a coordinated triangulation effort, but you will personally train their radio techs, and I want irrefutable proof, not just another inconclusive report." It was a huge concession. Sam eagerly accepted. Over the course of the next convoy run, Sam, with Elena's help, spent hours on ship-to-ship radio, instructing the radio operators from the USS Wakefield and the USS Lexington on how to use their newly installed, crudely modified antennae. It was a crash course in advanced signals intelligence, taught by a third-class technician, much to the initial bewilderment of the other petty officers. The system was rudimentary. Sam would detect a burst, notify the others, and they would all attempt to capture it simultaneously, recording its precise timing and bearing. The short duration of the signals made this a monumental task, but with practice they developed a rhythm, and then it happened again. A series of faint Type B bursts, emanating from the Norwegian coast, but this time from multiple distinct locations, all active within minutes of each other. This wasn't a single relay station, it was a network. Using the combined data from the 3 ships, Sam and Elena meticulously plotted the bearings. The intersecting lines formed tight, precise triangles. The coordinates were astonishingly accurate, pointing to 4 specific locations along the Norwegian and Danish coasts, well inland from the immediate shoreline, often tucked into fjords or dense forests. These were not the positions of coastal batteries or naval bases. These were deep, hidden, strategic locations. Thorne immediately forwarded the detailed report, including the raw signal data, the precise coordinates, and Sam's analysis, directly to General Douglas McPherson, head of Allied Signals Intelligence for the European Theatre. McPherson, a brilliant but demanding officer known for his innovative thinking, saw the potential immediately. This wasn't just about U-boats anymore. The precision and consistency of the data were compelling. Macpherson bypassed the usual bureaucracy and authorized a Special Forces reconnaissance mission, a covert operation to investigate two of the most promising coordinates in occupied Norway. A small team of British Royal Marines, experts in clandestine operations, were parachuted into the snow-covered mountains, overlooking one of Sam's plotted locations. Days later, a chilling report filtered back. The commandos had discovered not just a radio station, but a sprawling, camouflaged complex carved into the rock, almost entirely underground. It was a sophisticated communications hub, but also something more, a logistics center, with evidence of heavy transport vehicles, workshops, and even a small, highly secure airstrip. The plot twist was devastatingly clear. This wasn't just a U-boat relay station. It was a German intelligence nerve center, potentially coordinating much larger clandestine operations, perhaps even the development or deployment of new secret weapons. The discovery sent shockwaves through Allied High Command. The ghost signals were no longer theoretical anomalies. They were the heartbeat of a hidden enemy. The revelations from the commando raid fundamentally reshaped Allied intelligence. General Douglas Macpherson, known for his incisive, strategic mind, personally flew to the Bainbridge's next port of call to meet with Sam Miller and Commander Thorne. Macpherson, a man of imposing presence, listened intently as Sam, still slightly nervous in the presence of such a high-ranking officer, explained his antenna modifications and the new triangulation methodology. Elena, standing by Sam's side, provided crucial context and detailed operational logs. Thorne, now Sam's staunch advocate, vouched for the young technician's integrity and the undeniable efficacy of his system. "Miller, your ingenuity has exposed a blind spot that has cost us dearly," Macpherson stated, his voice resonating with a mix of awe and regret. "We've been looking for needles in a haystack with a magnet when we needed a microscope." The general immediately ordered the full implementation of Sam's Miller array design, as it was quickly dubbed, across all Allied signals intelligence units. Factories were repurposed to produce the specialized antennae at an expedited rate, and a rapid training program was initiated for radio technicians throughout the Navy, Army Signal Corps, and RAF. Sam, a third-class petty officer just weeks prior, found himself promoted to chief petty officer and put in charge of a new, highly specialized signals intelligence unit based in Scotland, tasked with further developing the Miller array and coordinating its deployment. Elena Rodriguez was promoted to lieutenant junior grade and became his second in command, her operational expertise proving invaluable in turning Sam's theoretical concepts into practical, battle-ready procedures. The skepticism and resistance Sam had initially faced dissolved into a frantic scramble to catch up. Commander Thorne, now Captain Thorne, became a key liaison between Sam's unit and fleet operations, ensuring that the invaluable intelligence gathered was rapidly disseminated and acted upon. The entire philosophy of Allied signals intelligence underwent a dramatic transformation. No longer were they solely reliant on broad sweeps and code breaking. They now possessed a precise proactive tool for uncovering the physical infrastructure of the enemy's hidden communications, the ability to pinpoint, with remarkable accuracy, the origins of even the most fleeting and weak German transmissions allowed for a new layer of intelligence gathering. Reconnaissance flights could now be directed to exact coordinates, searching for camouflaged installations rather than simply scanning for visible activity. Strategic bombing raids could be planned against these newly discovered targets, disrupting German command and control and crippling their ability to coordinate U-boat movements and other covert operations. The psychological impact on Allied forces was immense. The feeling of fighting a ghost, of being constantly outmaneuvered by an invisible enemy, began to recede, replaced by a renewed sense of purpose and a belief that they could indeed counter German cunning. For the Germans, it was the opposite. Their previously undetectable network, which they had believed impenetrable, was suddenly vulnerable. General Werner Kessler, head of German clandestine communications, noted in his encrypted reports an alarming increase in Allied lucky strikes against his supposedly secure installations, never quite understanding how their highly specialized, low-emission burst transmissions were being compromised. He suspected a mole, or a fundamental flaw in their encryption, never imagining that a single unconventional antenna, born from the frustration of a lowly American technician, was systematically unraveling his carefully constructed web of secrecy. Sam Miller, surrounded by a growing team of dedicated technicians and analysts, remained remarkably grounded despite the sudden attention and promotions. His focus was always on the problem, on the signal, on the lives that depended on his work. The hum of the new, more sophisticated Miller array consoles, now standard issue, was a constant reminder of the profound impact of his persistence. The transformation was complete. From an ignored tinkerer to the architect of a new era in signals intelligence, Sam Miller had, against all odds, given the Allies eyes where they had once been blind. The impact of the Miller array on the Battle of the Atlantic was swift and decisive. With the ability to pinpoint previously undetectable German communications hubs, Allied forces began to systematically dismantle the Kriegsmarine's invisible network. U-boat resupply points, often cleverly disguised within coastal villages or remote fjords, were identified and targeted by RAF Coastal Command. German intelligence collection, heavily reliant on these clandestine land-based stations, suffered crippling blows as their lines of communication were severed or compromised. Within months, the statistics painted a stark picture of the shift in fortunes. U-boat losses mounted dramatically, while Allied shipping losses, particularly in the critical North Atlantic convoys, began to decline for the first time in the war. The ability to intercept, triangulate, and act upon even the briefest of German burst transmissions meant that U-boat wolfpacks found it increasingly difficult to coordinate attacks or report on convoy movements without immediate repercussions. What was once a maddeningly effective cloak of invisibility for the German U-boats became a beacon for Allied hunters. The Miller array was quickly integrated into every level of Allied operations. Naval destroyers and frigates, equipped with their own smaller shipborne versions, could act as mobile direction-finding stations, working in concert to track and harass U-boats with unprecedented accuracy. Reconnaissance aircraft outfitted with specialized Miller arrays could conduct highly targeted patrols, guiding bomber squadrons to hidden facilities that were once thought impervious to detection. The strategic implications extended far beyond the Battle of the Atlantic. The discovery of the extensive, deeply entrenched German base network provided critical intelligence for the planning of Operation Overlord, the D-Day landings. Knowing the locations of these clandestine command and control centers allowed Allied strategists to plan precision bombing campaigns and sabotage missions to disrupt German defenses and communications during the crucial invasion period. Sam Miller, despite his rapid ascent in rank and influence, remained the quiet, focused technician. He continued to innovate, working on adaptations of the Miller array for airborne platforms and even smaller, portable versions for special forces operations. His work desk remained cluttered with schematics, his mind always searching for the next improvement, the next way to pierce the enemy's veil of secrecy. Elena Rodriguez, now his trusted second-in-command, proved indispensable in managing the growing team and translating Sam's technical brilliance into operational protocols. Their working relationship, forged in the cramped radio room of the Bainbridge, was a testament to collaboration and mutual respect. Captain Thorne, now a highly decorated officer and a vocal proponent of unconventional thinking, often visited Sam's unit, marveling at the constant innovation and the stream of vital intelligence being generated. He frequently reminded his subordinates that some of the greatest breakthroughs came not from following the manual, but from challenging its limitations. The human element of this technological leap was profound. The morale among Allied sailors and airmen soared as the ghosts of the Atlantic became tangible targets. The dread of unseen attacks slowly receded, replaced by a growing confidence in their ability to fight back effectively. For countless merchant seamen, Sam Miller's quiet innovation translated directly into a safer passage across the perilous ocean. It wasn't just about sinking U-boats, it was about saving lives, ensuring the flow of vital supplies, and paving the way for the eventual liberation of Europe. The tide had truly turned. The long-term legacy of Sam Miller's unconventional antenna modification extended far beyond the immediate conclusion of World War II. His pioneering work in high-frequency direction finding for transient burst signals laid the foundational principles for modern signals intelligence and electronic warfare. The Miller array became a conceptual blueprint for subsequent generations of highly directional and sensitive antennae, fundamentally altering how intelligence agencies around the world approach the detection and analysis of elusive enemy communications. After the war, Sam Miller, now a decorated veteran, chose to return to civilian life, declining offers for continued service in military intelligence. He took up a position as an electrical engineering professor at a small university in the Midwest, where he inspired countless students with his practical, hands-on approach to problem-solving. He never sought the limelight, preferring the quiet satisfaction of discovery to public accolades, though his contributions were quietly recognized within the highest echelons of Allied intelligence. Elena Rodriguez, continuing her distinguished career, rose through the ranks, eventually becoming a respected figure in naval communications, playing a crucial role in the development of early Cold War signals intelligence systems. She always credited Sam Miller as the catalyst for her own innovative spirit and the transformative changes in their field. The story of Sam Miller and his modified antenna serves as a powerful reminder that critical breakthroughs often emerge from unexpected places, from individuals willing to challenge dogma and pursue unconventional solutions in the face of skepticism. In a war defined by massive industrial output and vast strategic maneuvers, it was the quiet persistence of one man, tinkering with discarded parts in a cramped workshop, that provided the Allies with a decisive edge. His story underscores the truth that innovation is not always about grand, centralized projects, but frequently about individual genius, perseverance, and the courage to see beyond accepted limitations. The ability to turn the whispers of the enemy into actionable intelligence proved instrumental in winning the Battle of the Atlantic, safeguarding critical supply lines, and ultimately contributing significantly to the success of the Allied invasion of Europe. It forever changed the landscape of electronic warfare, leaving an indelible mark on the history of military intelligence. And that concludes our story. If you made it this far, please share your thoughts in the comments. What part of this historical account surprised you most? Don't forget to subscribe for more untold stories from World War II, and check out the video on screen for another incredible tale from history. Until next time.